What is a scary or horrifying fact that shouldn't be true, but is? Snails have thousands of teeth. There is more actual lemon juice in lemon scented pledge spray than there is in country time lemonade. In the NT, Australia, I remember seeing a government warning that crocodiles inhabit the area. Among the few bullet points of advice on the sign, the last one read, if they see you, it is already too late. Every single year, there are thousands of people in the US alone who disappear. Most of them show up again, usually the next day, but sometimes a few days, a few weeks, or even a few months later. However, out of these thousands of people, there are roughly 150 people every single year who disappear and simply never appear again. Nobody knows what has happened to those people. They might be dead, they might not be, we simply don't know. Over 150 dead bodies of climbers are still on Mount Everest. Tourism at Mount Everest in itself is just effed up on so many levels. Into Thin Air is a great read on the topic. There are more Panda Express locations in the world than actual panda bears. A lone pilot was flying in Australia in 1978. He reported to air traffic control that he was accompanied by an aircraft above him. When asked to identify the aircraft, he replied, "It isn't an aircraft." His plane disappeared and was never to be found again. Pigs can dispose of a body with relative ease. One of the experiments the Japanese did during WWII Unit 731 was cutting off limbs of living, waking people without anesthesia and sewing those limbs onto other prisoners. They also infected male prisoners with various infectious diseases, then forced them at gunpoint to RE pregnant prisoners to see if the disease would transmit to the baby. Some monks used to endure a spiritual practice whereby they eliminated all their body fat through diet and exercise, ate wood lacquer tea to kill off internal bacteria, then sealed themselves in a tomb holding a string attached to a bell. A year after the bell stopped ringing, the tomb was opened, and if the monk's body was found to be uncorrupted, they were revered as a saint. If not, they were reburied. The process took years, and as they continued, the monks required more and more help from their brothers until they entered the tomb. And the whole time you'd hear bells ringing from the nearby tombs as the monks inside slowly wound down the last days of their lives, voluntarily poisoned, starved, and buried alive for a chance at sainthood. The sperm whale is the loudest creature on Earth at 230 dB. Like louder than all the other humans get up to. The Tsar Bomba, the loudest explosion ever detonated by humanity, was 6 dB quieter at 224. Sperm whales can produce sound waves so powerful it can kill you, though apparently they have been known to use their inside voices around human divers. They whisper around us so they don't hurt us. How about that? Dylan Klebold, one of the killers of the Columbine massacre, attended the school's prom 3 nights before the shooting. When he got home, he was talking to his mom and showed her the flask he'd brought to prom, explaining that they'd only drank a little bit. He told her, "I just wanted you to know you can trust me." It's so chilling that he could say that and less than 72 hours later participate in the killing of 13 other people and himself. 60% of murders are unsolved here in Pakistan. We simply don't have the technology and training of the police officers in the West. Khaled ElMasri is a German and Lebanese citizen who was mistakenly abducted by the Macedonian police in 2003 and handed over to the US Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. While in CIA custody, he was flown to Afghanistan, where he was held at a black site and routinely interrogated, beaten, strip-searched, sodomized, and subjected to other cruel forms of inhumane and degrading treatment and torture. After ElMasri held hunger strikes and was detained for 4 months in the salt pit, the CIA finally admitted his arrest and torture were a mistake and released him. He is believed to be among an estimated 3,000 detainees whom the CIA abducted from 2001 to 2005. In May 2004, the US ambassador to Germany, Daniel R. Coates, convinced the German Interior Minister, Otto Schily, not to press charges or to reveal the program. ElMasri filed suit against the CIA for his arrest, extraordinary rendition and torture. In 2006, his suit ElMasri v. Tenet, in which he was represented by the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, was dismissed by the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, based on the U.S. Governments claiming the state secret's privilege. The ACLU said the Bush administration attempted to shield its abuses by invoking this privilege. The case was also dismissed by the appeals court for the Fourth Circuit, and in December 2007, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear the case. On the 13th of December 2012, ElMasri won an Article 34 case at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. The court determined he had been tortured while held by CIA agents and ruled that Macedonia was responsible for abusing him while in the country, and knowingly transferring him to the CIA when torture was a possibility. It awarded him compensation, which was all. This marked the first time that CIA activities against detainees was legally declared as torture. The European Court condemned nations for collaborating with the United States in these secret programs. Something is eating the Milky Way galaxy. No, it isn't the plot for a Star Trek episode. It's really happening. In 2009, researchers found a cluster of galaxies moving at an extraordinary speed towards a small patch of sky between the constellations of Centaurus and Vela. Some unknown force is tearing away chunks of the galaxy, and astronomers still have no clue what exactly is causing it. It's been named dark flow. There is something big out there, far bigger than anything in our known universe. Such a behemoth would impose a kind of tilt on the universe, causing matter to move in one particular direction, as observations of the dark flow suggest. Could be anything up to and including another universe. A koala's cuddle could give you chlamydia. You know how utterly batch crazy Florida is? Actually, all states are that crazy. It's just that Florida has rather lax privacy laws regarding legal matters, so they report it. Within 3 days of death, the enzymes from your digestive system begin to digest your body. Antibiotic resistance. In 2010 I got a MRSA infection. Spent 6 weeks in and out of hospital, ending in organ failure and sepsis, nearly died. 2 months later I was back in again. 2 months after that I was back again. On my third admittance they had run out of antibiotics to give me. The doctors researched 4 hours to find something they could try. Dug up an old antibiotic with terrible side effects and tried it. It didn't work. Luckily one of the ones I had previously tried and had a bad reaction to during sepsis, so probably not the medication. They tried again and it worked, but being deathly ill while the doctors have no idea what to give you is a scary place to be. An unbelievable number of people who die of dehydration do so with a fair amount of fresh water in their possession. Yep, knew somebody that died this way due to horrible headaches caused by an undiagnosed brain tumor found during her autopsy that was so painful she threw up to the point of severe dehydration and died in her apartment right next to the sink. Being gay is illegal in 69 countries. In 7 of those countries homosexuality is punishable by death. I remember reading the front page of a newspaper my dad had just put down. There was this word I didn't understand. The headline was describing the corporal punishment a couple of men were to be sentenced to for an act they'd committed. My dad didn't want to explain what the word meant, while my mum really struggled to describe the act they'd been accused of. Ultimately, it just sounded like these men were cuddling in a disgusting way. These men were about to receive corporal punishment for something, which I understood was consensual and which they did in private. Did they harm each other? Did they hurt anyone? I vividly remember my confusion, and my young brain could not comprehend the logic behind the sentencing. Whatever the shiz at the bottom of the ocean. Seriously, we know so little about this place and we've seen so much murderous sh down there that we've only scratched the surface on how much nightmare fuel is actually down there. The oubliette, French, or the forgotten room as translated in English. In medieval times, people would be descended into these rooms which were like 35 foot deep below the ground as punishment. They were narrow, funnel shaped, with the only way in or out being through a trapdoor on the roof, through which they are lowered down in the first place. Kings and lords would torture people by keeping them in the oubliette because these rooms would be so narrow there would be no space to sit or even turn. These prisoners would be left there to starve while standing 24 hours and 7 days a week, to their death, sometimes among the bones and human wastes of the inmates who had died before them. The only light, if there was any, would come from the trapdoor on the roof. There would be absolutely no chance of escape as it was impossible to climb up the walls of the narrow passage. These were designed to inflict tremendous psychological torture on the prisoner, often leading them into delirium. Absolute horror as to what we are capable of doing to our fellow human beings. You might feel like the healthiest person in the world and yet still randomly die in your sleep. Sudden arrhythmic death syndrome is just one example. There are tons of small obstructions and irregularities that your heart could be suffering from that go completely unnoticed by you, your friends, and your doctors. You might be at an increased risk of just passing on when you go to bed tonight, and no one would even suspect as much until you actually died. If the average person understood our monetary system, there would be revolution tomorrow. Henry Ford. The partial reserve banking system is actually the biggest theft of wealth in human history. People starve to death every day while we produce more than enough food to feed them all. When you have scurvy, all your old scars and wounds open up, due to the vitamin needed to maintain scar tissue. So for me, for example, I had my jaw dislocated and my gums cut open from cheek to remove wisdom teeth. If I got scurvy, I would bleed uncontrollably from the inside of my mouth out. What would be your most horrifying scar? In Mississippi and some parts of Florida, there is a bacteria in the water at the coast that will literally eat your flesh off of you. Florida is much safer than Mississippi though, at least, in that aspect. There is a mosquito in Florida that, when it bites you, can make your brain swell inside your skull and can possibly kill you. There are more slaves today than there were during the transatlantic slave trade era. In Argentina we have no DNA bank and a barely functional fingerprint detection system, even though we invented that bee. Also, negligence by forensics is the norm. What does this mean? In Argentina, if you kill someone you don't like, but the cops never suspect you, you'll never ever be remotely close to being busted. In fact, anyone could get away with murdering a stranger at any time without previous preparation, and if they somehow catch you red-handed, a life sentence is 35 years here with parole every couple of years. And there's a law that says that by every 2 people that get incarcerated, 1 must be freed, so there's always the chance you'll get randomly freed. Also, the average time a killer does here is between 10 and 20 years. The fact that we don't murder each other as much means anarchy could possibly work, I guess.